Now, we often hear the terms saturated fat and unsaturated fat, and this is often in the context of nutrition, dietary advice, and such. And so the reason why saturated fats and unsaturated fats have different connotations, we often hear of saturated fats as the bad fats, and so to eat less of them. And we hear of unsaturated fats as the good fats, per se, and to eat more of them, theoretically. Basically, the reason for this is if you look at the saturated fat right here. So this is the structure of a simple saturated triacylglyceride. So you have your glycerol group here. You have 3 fatty acid chains right here. You can see that these are completely saturated. So in a previous video, we talked about saturation and degree of unsaturation, and how degree of unsaturation can be introduced by introducing a pi bond or a ring. Here we can see that this is completely unsaturated. There are no pi bonds, there are no rings. It's just a straight up hydrocarbon chain for each fatty acid. And so this is what we would call a saturated fat. And the reason why saturated fats, I guess, are have sort of a negative connotation is because of it's somewhat because of the fact that they're so saturated right here. And so you can see that they're straight, they're thin, and for this reason they can pack very well. And so you can kind of think, if you eat a lot of saturated fats, the more saturated fats you eat, because they're so saturated, they don't really branch out, and so they can pack very well in your body. And so if we sort of use these paper strips as an example of saturated fats, you see here we have 4 strips, and so they're completely saturated, there's no kinks in them, and they pack very well. You can see how well they pack. There's only 4, and they pack quite well. So if you can imagine, the more of these you eat per every, square unit of body weight, you can pack a lot more of these saturated fats in your body. And the more fats you have in your body, the higher risk you are of chronic diseases like hypertension and whatnot. And so if we contrast saturated fats with unsaturated fats, here you can see that there are degrees of unsaturation introduced in each fatty acid chain. And as we know, when you have a double bond, especially a cis double bond, you can introduce kinks in the chain. There's kinks in the chain which inhibit its ability to pack as well as the saturated fats. And this is actually the reason why that unsaturated fats are, termed, quote, healthier for you, despite being named fats. And so if we contrast the example of how well the saturated fats pack well with unsaturated fats, here we have another 4 strips of paper, really rudimentary example of fats. You can see that they clearly don't pack as well as the saturated fats. So here we have the saturated fats. Below, up here we have the unsaturated fats. And so, obviously if you were going to pack your adipose tissue full of fat, you'd want it to be packed by the unsaturated fats than the saturated fats, because I guess theoretically you'd have less fat per unit of body weight.